My name is Dr. Rick Seguil.
And action. Hey, Jay had a... This is Kirk And action. Hey everyone. James had a question about diabetes and exercise. And if there's a way to dial in diabetes. Well, yes, there always is a way to dial in diabetes. Everybody's a little different, but exercise might be your way. I just turned that one around. So if this is the first time you're finding me though, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. So diabetes and exercise. I would usually push most of my patients, no matter what the disease process is to about a 90-minute moderate to intense activity per week rule. Everybody, most people will fit into that as far as benefits. But there are some people who fit below the curve and some people who want more than that. So I did do a video on exercise intensity, so I'll put a link down below. I did the video while I was doing my routine, which is going up and down a mountain. And I think you'll notice if you watch the video, the shortness of breath or the perceived exertion while I was speaking into the microphone about getting up the hill, and then as I was going downhill to base, when I turned around, I wasn't so short of breath. So that's one way of doing or measuring or keeping a metric of how intense you exercise. Remember, you have to have, if you're going to use exercise as a drug, which is what it's supposed to be. Insulin is a drug, and it'll help diabetics lower their blood glucose levels. Metformin is a drug, and it helps get cells sensitized so that they know that insulin is around, and they work on and get blood glucose out of the bloodstream into the cell. That's where you want it. Blood glucose sits around in the bloodstream, and if it sits too long at too high of a concentration, it's irritating. It can lead to problems. So what do you want to do with that? You want to, number one, not take so much glucose, or at least limit the glucose, limit the timing, limit how fast it gets into the bloodstream, and number two, you want the blood glucose to get out of the bloodstream into the cell. But to get into the cell, you have to have that key to open the lock. And the key to open the lock to get the glucose into the cell is called insulin. So here's where the problem occurs is, if you're a full-blown diabetic, it's easy. You just check your glycosylated hemoglobin, that's the hemoglobin A1C, every 3 to 4 months, and we see if you're making headway. If you're not, usually the endocrinologist would bump up your insulin, or you bump up your insulin. With a lot of patients who use the insulin pump, they'll use that peripheral brain to bump up the insulin. Those insulin pumps are awesome. They act as your pancreas. And I'm okay with them now. I had my reservations with them about 5 years ago because I saw a lot of people coming in with insulin pumps. They were just morbidly obese. I don't have a problem with morbid obesity, but I have a problem when it doesn't change. So any disease process, if you think about it, will usually cause a flagrant problem. It'll usually lead to a death or early death because of whatever body organ it affects. And diabetes, if it's type 2, diabetes type 2 or type 2 diabetes, T2D, usually will be from overweight or overeating or not watching what you eat or not enough activity or too much stress. It used to be that diabetes type 2 or type 2 diabetes was a very rare problem, but now we're getting T2D in kids, which is not good because about 15 years ago it was unheard of. So I don't think the progression of the disease is suddenly manifesting. I think that society is getting bigger and bigger. And yes, I'm going back to being overweight or using overweight has overeating as the crux of the problem, which is a problem in itself because it's just society is just too stressed out. We're sitting down too much. We're very adept at ordering stuff real quick and getting it to satisfy hunger. You can even drive, as I mentioned in a previous video, you can drive to get your food, you can drive to the next store, get your coffee, and you can drive to the next store, get your DVD, and then you can go home and sit down. You don't have to get up to do anything. And that's just a shame. I think that's why we have atrophy. That's why we have weight gain. That's why we have muscle breakdown and loss. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit far off here. So bottom line is, I think we have to exercise. As far as how much? Well, I would suggest 90 minutes a week at the minimum of moderate to intense, and I would stress the intense exercise. I usually say either once a week, all 90 once a week, or 3 times a week, 30 minutes, or 6 times a week, 15 minutes. The 15 to 20 minute is all I have. That's all I have to do. That's all the free time I have, and I have to do that at about 5 o'clock every morning, 5 days a week, usually 4 days a week if I do a little bit more than the 15 minutes at a time, and I'm done. But as soon as I walk in the gym, I'm business, and I push the envelope with pushing my heart rate up. So I have a formula in my last video as far as how to perceive or get moderate to intense activity, and you should be cleared by your doctor before you decide to hit that peak. But if you get to that point, and if you don't know how to do that, get a Fitbit. If you don't know how to do that, get a heart rate monitor for your polar. If you don't know how to do that, then take your own pulse, not up here, but on your wrist. One way or another, you have to be able to monitor. You can also do that on the handlebars of your stair stepper or your treadmill or your bike in the gym. Most of them have impedance numbers or impedance handles where you can check your heart rate. It's kind of accurate, but I say push as hard as possible. Now, if you're a diabetic or you have a knee injury or you have low back pain or you're just too damn deconditioned because you're just starting out this, that's okay. But you might have to get a coach to help guide you to get to a decent level that's mild to moderate activity and be tolerant of that and not get injured. So especially if you are an old athlete from high school, your mentality will zoom you back to when you were on the track doing quarter-mile runs. Now, if you do that with bad knees and a big belly, you're going to get hurt. So it's nice to have accountability to a coach. Yes, the coach is going to cost you. I just had a patient that went to Planet Fitness. He says he was charged $30. It sounds like the coach, who was like 35 years old, did some pretty decent stuff for phase 1 exercise. So it's hit or miss as far as who. The higher you go on the totem pole as far as the level of education, the more gifts that person will have. Now, there are some people who are really good with exercise outside the box and don't have any degrees, but it's just hard to find, and your chances are higher if you get somebody with a lot of education. So look for credentials, test them out, see what their previous experiences were or previous successes were as far as the patients, and commit. But if you commit, you have to listen to this coach, and you have to find a coach that matches your time schedule, your likes, your dislikes, and hopefully you'll find one local. I know there are coaches that can help guide you as far as designing exercise routine that are online. That's fine. Either way, get somebody that's accountable, that you can be accountable to, and it can also progress you rather quickly without any or lowering the chances of injury. So there's also, if for those of you who can't afford a coach and you can't really push into high intensity interval training, there's also a new concept, well, it's not new, but high intensity intermittent physical activity. And that means taking accountability of the yard work you do, cleaning cars, cleaning housework, the work you do at work. Now, I always say that the work you do at work doesn't count because we're under the gun. We have a schedule. That's totally different. When we do things and are whistling or we're listening to music in the background or we've got our headphones on, that can result in some really good hormones. And that's why I put orgasmic here, because exercise can bring you to that level of, I feel great all day. And I just like having an orgasm. If you remember having an orgasm in the morning will usually make you smile all day long. And that can be even on a Monday. So why is that? It's because post-orgasm, which is a physical thing, post-orgasm you have a release of endorphin, oxytocin, melatonin, well, depending on what time of day, serotonin. Those are all love hormones. For guys, sometimes vasopressin. So these are all hormones that make you feel good. Because, again, natural selection says that if it makes you feel good, you'll do it again. So we have a built-in, we're hardwired to want to have an orgasm and to want to fall in love. So again, the exercise can bring on that post-orgasmic state. But here's the thing, it's at the sacrifice of having to move muscle. And if you are a couch potato and you go and climb the Hancock, you are going to be totally burned out, short of breath, full of lactic acid, and that's not going to be a good feeling. So it'll be a negative reward. You'll have that as a memory of bad. So we want to do things successfully on a scale of going to a peak, a maximum. And that's why I put here in green, my suggestion is 30 minutes 3 times a week. That's 90 minutes at the least, and for 3 months, with a delta or a change in medicines depending on the results of that 3-month effort. If you're a diabetic on medicines like metformin and glyburide, I think it's important to check your hemoglobin A1C and your fasting insulin about every 3 to 4 months. Not too many of my colleagues will do fasting insulins. I think it's important. Not too many of my colleagues will do that 2-hour post-glucose tolerance test, which is really accurate compared to other tests, just as a pain in the ass to do. But it's probably, I think, the most accurate. It's good for telling you you're in the right direction. It's definitely good for direction. If you just want a test that's somewhat accurate and you just have to get direction, I think your weight, your waistline, your level of fitness, hemoglobin A1C, and your fasting insulin in the morning at 7 a.m. or whenever you start your day would be important. If you use those things as directional markers, you can say that you're proceeding in the right direction. If you want accuracy, a 2-hour glucose tolerance test with an insulin level before that. So for my doctors who are watching, that's what I would do. It's not standard with your endocrinology offices, but I believe that hemoglobin A1C it depends on your, for thalassemia, for macrocytosis, if you're low on B12. I think there's inaccuracies because hemoglobin A1C, all it does is it checks your blood glucose level that's attached to a red blood cell, and it puts it into a formula. If the algorithm is proper, then it's reliable. But if your algorithm has variability, like you're on medicines, you're on testosterone, you're anemic, you have big red blood cells, it might be off, and then it loses its accuracy. And for many of you who have been told by your doctors, hemoglobin A1C is less than 5.7, hemoglobin A1C is less than 5.7, but then every year you're told that, but then your weight is a BMI greater than 25, don't be fooled. That's not healthy. So the fact that your doctor said, well, your blood tests are okay, so you must be healthy, that's not healthy. You always have to take into account your height to weight ratio, your level of fitness, your waist to hip your circumference or your ratio. It's important. And maybe I'm picking on people, but I don't like disease to progress because I know where it takes us. If you're 20 and you're 30 and you have disease like diabetes, prediabetes, or elevated insulin or insulin resistance, if you don't change anything, it's only a matter of time before you get on medicines. And if you still don't change anything, it's only a matter of time before you get an insulin pump. And if you still don't change anything and you're on your insulin pump, you're just having a donut and dialing up the pump, or having a beer and dialing up the pump, you're on your way to a heart attack and stroke. So that's where exercise comes in handy, because exercise has all these benefits. It increases insulin sensitivity. When you have exercise and you have a level of glucose in your bloodstream that's high, you don't need insulin around. You don't have to have insulin sensitivity. You will have a back door for glucose to get into the cell without that locking key thing, which is cool. But I would suggest you do the same amount of exercise at the same time of day, hopefully not too soon before bed, because I think it'll screw up your sleeping time. But if you can make it the same time and regimented, you make exercise like a medicine. How do you take medicines? On a regular basis. So I would do that, try to shoot for that, and it'll lower your blood glucose. Not only at the time that you exercise, but it'll also make cells more sensitive. So it'll get your blood glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, your postprandial blood glucose lower than non-exercising, even if it's not on the days that you exercise. Muscle fitness still continues on, so even if you don't exercise. It also increases the movement of glucose into a cell by stimulating good blood pressures, effective flow of blood vessels and blood in the system. You also make the system more bulletproof. It functions at a higher level. You can even have thyroid more responsive, say, if you pick the right macronutrients and exercise. So I really think that if you exercise, and I like fasted exercise, but I can't say that for my insulin users, I think you can really bring down the amount of glucose and bring up the glucose sensitivity of all cells. So the other thing, I mean, just basically, it does decrease your chances for Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is considered type 3 diabetes, T3D, because the plaques and the inflammation noted in the brains of Alzheimer's patients are also the same kind of inflammation you see in diabetes. So if you wanted to drive it home, the other reason I'm beating up on my diabetics is because it's going to lead to this too. Forget the heart attack and the cancer, you might have this. So if you make it past 60, you will still fail your memory. And then those of you who are on a statin, the argument is there that statins can contribute to that too, mostly in the form of CoQ10 screwed up. But either way, I'd still want, if I were a patient with a high family history of Alzheimer's disease in the family, I would try to get that down, especially if you have the allele ApoE4. Well, never mind about that. I'll talk about Alzheimer's in a bit, but you also can use or build up muscle to be more of a furnace to not only get the glucose and break it down fast, but also to lower the cholesterol. Lowering total cholesterol, lowering LDL, awesome. For men, if you can drive up testosterone, it'll make you more sensitized to all those other hormones. So proper testosterone usage, awareness, reception will also make every other cell in the body work properly. So testosterone is awesome. It'll also make you more apt to do exercising. It'll make you sleep deeper, it'll have your sex better. So there's no reasons why we can't take advantage. It also gives you energy. For women, testosterone in the morning gives you energy. If you don't have enough testosterone, or if your testosterone is a little bit too high and your progesterone and your estrogen are a little bit too low, that's off balance. You want to balance that out. So there's other things. I'm not going to get into HRT, but the other thing it does help with is mood. So mood, energy, and satiety. Exercise seems to give you, most people, a better mood. In fact, it's the first treatment of choice for depression, and a lot of diabetics are apt to get depression. First treatment of choice is exercise. Again, as far as what exercise, you can use your activities or steps per day to measure out, and that's non-working steps now. If you're keeping up with average American, that's 10,000 steps in a day. But don't stop at that. Just because you hit 10,000, I would still say of the three types of muscle fibers that you have available to you, type 1 will get you these, you'll develop when you do your steps per day. But 2A and 2X or 2B, I think those muscle fibers, if you maximize on them, they become the furnace to take care of burning off cholesterol, triglycerides, and glucose. So it also make the liver more efficient when the blood flow going back and forth from the liver, the hormones going back and forth through the liver. When you burn up or exercise, you burn up ATP. Liver has to produce that. Liver has to break down glycogen, turn it into glucose, send it to the muscle. Muscle breaks it down, makes lactic acid. Lactic acid goes back to the liver. It's a great cycle. It gets things going. And the instead of stagnation, you get things moving. The Cori cycle, if it's never touched upon by a liver, you're not taking advantage of something of a different cycle that it's good for. So I think it is important to drive up energy level, especially for those of you who are fatigued. It's important to improve mood, especially for those of you who have depression and diabetes. And it's also important for satiety. When you exercise properly and you're mindful of your food, usually you're not going to make bad choices. Now, I do have that. There is a paradox with young guys about exercise because they feel bulletproof. They suddenly go and have a beer and a donut because they say, I worked out for that, I deserve it. Well, you can't do that. In fact, those of you who are fasting, check out my fasting video. Those of you who are fasting, be careful if you're a diabetic that's on insulin, but those of you who are fasting, if you do too much of an exercise / fast, you might actually, you're supposed to, after the fast is done, not just fall into my starvation or the binging after the fast, but you're supposed to, during that time that after the fast, you're supposed to really take advantage of really good building blocks. So don't forget that if you are fasting, it's not just after your fast binge. You have to, at that point in time when the cells are regrouping and stem cells are being produced, like in the fasting mimicking diet, after the 5 days, you really have to maintain yourself for 25 days to take advantage of those new stem cells, to clear all the crap cells out of you, and to hunt down for more cancers and infections and Lyme disease. So fasting is not that easy. It might be good for the short run, but it also, you have to consider what to do afterward. So anyway, diabetes and exercise will help you with satiety. So those are the basic building blocks for why I think exercise is important for diabetics. If you have problems with trying to figure out your exercise routine, or if you don't know what to do with because there's no gyms or you just can't afford it, you have to do a ton of reading, and you'll have to do reading from respectable places. So try to experiment. A lot of in Illinois, a lot of park districts will offer things now in spring for a cheap amount of I don't know what it is, 40 to 50 bucks for once or twice a week for 6 weeks routines. You can try them out if you have that available to you and test out your exercise of choice if you're not sure what to do. If you are an athlete, then most likely you're going to go back to what you did when you were younger, and that's fine too. But listen, if it didn't sustain you before, if you just did that recently and it didn't sustain you, I don't know if I go back to that because it didn't sustain you the last time, so why do you think it's going to sustain you this time? Now, I have dialed in what I do. I do high intensity interval training, I do bodybuilding, I do martial arts, I do yoga, I do hiking, sometimes running, depending on how my heels and my knees feel. And I have always relied on that, or I've thrown in different recipes of combinations depending on my age. And I know that's going to change in 3 years when I hit 60, but that's the dynamics of what I do. But I also have the training of sports medicine, integrated medicine, and being an athlete, so, and a coach and a yoga teacher. So I kind of have gone through it. If you don't have those the same opportunities of training as I, then you get other guys, people to design it for you. You have them be your Google search engine. You can always Google search. I can be your Google search engine too, to tell you what's the riffraff and what's really accurate and how to shortcut your direction and your pathway to your summit, your success. But if I'm not available, then you have to find somebody that's really good with those kind of with that kind of knowledge base. So hopefully James, hopefully this helps a little bit. Hopefully it wasn't too boring, but that's basically what I would like you to consider doing. Most important is if you are starting on your own, don't get hurt, because the pain and the anguish of and the experience of having an injury when you're going gung-ho and suddenly you can't do anything and you're gaining weight because you're immobile again puts you back at square one. So this has to be efficient, it has to be directional, has to progress, and it can't be painful. So again, usually every 3 months I would reevaluate progress, see if we're going towards in the right direction. And with enough visits every 3 months, if the numbers, hemoglobin A1C and insulin and cholesterol, all improve, then you don't have to see me every 3 months. But that's just a fallback to make sure you're still on the road to success. Because most of the time when I have somebody comes in and I give them the right act, because this is wrong, cholesterol's too high, glucose is too high, testosterone's dropping, your estrogen is off and progesterone's off, or your adrenals are off. When I give all those are not meant to be scolding. They're meant to be metrics for you to engage, understand, and use as motivation to make the change. I will watch you for forever if you want, but if I just watch you go down the tubes, I can do that too. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, but if I just watch you go down the tubes, for whatever reason, I have friends who can help you. I have cardiologists who can do bypass or stents. I have endocrinologists who use insulin or GLP-2s. There's a whole bunch of different medicines. I have eye doctors who can fix diabetic retinopathy. So I have a whole bunch of friends. I have kidney doctors who can get you ready for dialysis. Now, obviously, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to have to experience that. But in case all else fails, then we might have to go that direction. But at least we save your life. And then when we do save your life, although it'll be harder, we can still make the lifestyle changes. Whether or not you're ready now or later, you will still have to make the lifestyle changes. Even if you are somebody on bypass, can't get rid of tobacco, kidney failure, and cancer, you still have to make the lifestyle changes. So unfortunately, it still comes down to sleeping properly, having love and happiness, eating a mindful practice, and exercise. So James, you're on your way. Those of you who are watching up until now, I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Give me some comments down below on the way you exercise and what you found. And again, dialing in or dialing up or dialing down your medicines, don't do it by yourself. You have to let one of us doctors figure it out for you. But I would only do it after proving, even if you're feeling fit, even if your waistline is decreasing, after proving the numbers are better, then we put the medicines at a lower level. I can help you wean off stuff, maybe your endocrinologist too, but don't do it yourself. It could be a problem. So hang in there, subscribe to me. I'll see you at the next Medic Clinic.